Hello everyone, this is John from Incendium D&D, and we're a little late to the party on this one, but today we're going to be taking a look at the Vecna Dossier, which is new content released by Wizards of the Coast. Now, unfortunately, this was free content to any member with a D&D Beyond account, but it looks like the promotion has expired as of yesterday at the time of this recording, the 16th. We still don't know if we're getting this maybe as a purchasable product in the D&D Beyond marketplace, or perhaps as part of a future official product, like a book. But the reason I still wanted to take a look at it is because I think what we're gonna get is a sneak peek at what maybe future legendary or really big bad monsters are going to look like, especially because we know that the whole edition is getting a little bit of an update in 2024. So just some quick things about this content before we really dive into it. First, there's a lot of speculation that I really agree with, that the reason that we got this content for free was because Vecna is right now a very popular household name. Apparently Vecna is the big bad villain of Stranger Things Season 4. And I know Stranger Things does have this thing where like it references D&D stuff a lot. And the other cool thing that this does is it adds to a small collection of stat blocks we've gotten for avatars of different gods. Now, Vecna as a character has had multiple interpretations, iterations throughout the years. In fact, the first time I ran across him was in 4th edition, where he was part of the Pantheon. And I do know Vecna was also the major villain of Critical Role Season 1. He was like the big final boss that Vox Machina fought together. The other cool thing I found out for myself, just cool trivia, is that Ray Winiger, who's like kind of like the business head of D&D right now, said that Vecna is actually an anagram for Vance, as in Jack Vance, whose Vancian spellcasting system was used originally in D&D, and you can still see its influence in spell slot design today. So I just thought that was a neat little trivia thing that I learned about it. This is also time for a hashtag shameless plug. Recently, Ian and I joined forces with Raymond O'Connor and Ariel Roscoe from the Running Off the Rails podcast to release our first third-party product, Emery's Log of Legendary Eminences. It's a great way to spice up some of those SRD stat blocks and make your boss encounters even more legendary. We're super proud of this product, and we're really excited to hear what you community members think about it. Link to it in the description below. Now, getting back to Vecna, just to reiterate, the reason I want to go over this content, whether you actually have access to the dossier or not, is because I think what we're getting is a sneak peek into legendary monster design moving forward. So we do have a lot here with Vecna's story, his lore. I don't know how much of it is consolidated versus how much of this is new. I really like how it is following along with 5th edition's trend of honoring D&D's legacy. So they're not trying to rewrite a whole bunch of stuff. There might just be some new twists here or there. I do love this art design for those of you who have this or have it zoomed in. So Vecna is theorized to be the first Lich, which means his stat block better be pretty scrumptious. And one of the cool things I think here is that one of the artifacts that's right in the Dungeon Master's Guide is the Book of Vile Darkness, which is said to have been written by Vecna, and is honestly kind of like the chapter black tape from Yu Yu Hakusho, where apparently every vile, evil, dark act humans have ever done is collected in this very magical, very evil tome. And his Lich form actually has the book in like the ribs in the center. I just think it's a really neat aesthetic design, and it does describe like the Sword of Kos, the Book of Vile Darkness, Vecna's hand and Vecna's eye. Again, this isn't really to look too much at the lore stuff. The thing I really want to dissect is the stat block, mostly because I'm of the belief that, you know, you can plug in stat blocks to play as is, but a lot of times stat blocks that are officially published can give you some great inspiration to tweak or tune them to best fit whatever game you have in mind. So let's get down to it. So first, Vecna is a medium undead. Interesting, he is definitely a creature. It's actually funny to kind of think about, like, what creature types would gods be? I mean, I assume they'd be celestials, but I remember the avatar of Tiamat in Tyranny of Dragons was considered a fiend. So it's just kind of an interesting philosophical thing, really. His armor class is 18. Pretty good. He only has 272 hit points, but that is a misleading number, especially once we get into some of his features. And he has a speed of 30, which is interesting that he doesn't have like a hover speed. I would probably give him a hover speed. I know he's got like a lot of teleportation mumbo jumbo going on. I don't know, I just feel like my liches hover. And looking at his stats, another thing I thought was really interesting, he is a wizard and intelligence is his spellcasting modifier, but wisdom is a higher stat than intelligence. And he's got some pretty beast saving throws, but also he doesn't have a great saving throw at everything. Those dex saves, man, those might hit him. And of course, he has redonkulous skill proficiencies. And what's kind of cool is, like, this is what a high level just wizard might look like. You don't have a bajillion skill proficiencies, you get 4, bud. The damage resistances look like they should, you know, cold, lightning, necrotic. Although he is immune, kind of like a demi-lich, to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing from non-magical attacks. That's something. He has some usual condition immunities. I've seen this kind of like similar to a Skull Lord before. Actually, it's the stun immunity that really, there's like nothing you can do, man. And then in terms of senses, he's got True Sight. The other thing is he's a challenge rating 26. Now, I do know that Wizards knows how unreliable challenge ratings used to be. That being said, they've definitely streamlined a lot of their stat block action economy. This is like a true CR 26 creature. So he has 5 legendary resistances. Good luck getting him to fail all of those. He also carries a +2 magic dagger. Now, this is an interesting one. If Vecna is slain, his soul refuses to accept its fate and lives on as a disembodied spirit that fashions a new body for itself after 1d100 years. Something I thought that was interesting was that Todd Kenrick did an interview with Ray Winiger over on the official D&D YouTube channel. And one thing that Ray Winiger said was that anytime you see something like 1d100 years, that's like code for whenever you feel like it. And I think that's a really interesting thing to know, because a lot of times I do know DMs that look at a rule like that and it must be that way. You must roll the die and you must accept its result. When a lot of times the actual code is like a wink, wink, nudge, nudge. As the DM, you're kind of free to do what makes sense. And I do think that conceptual discernment skill is something that a lot of DMs would really benefit from, especially when running their games. I'm gonna say, if I were to run Vecna, I would probably remove this feature. Or I would at least have some method of actually killing him. And this actually ties into my growing philosophy surrounding deities, which you can learn if you listen to our podcast, Dragon Mind, which is available on Spotify and all sorts of other podcast apps. Again, link in the description below. But yeah, I really like it when my players get to like definitively kill something. And of course, he has an unusual nature. He doesn't need like air, food, drink, or sleep. Now again, to get off to this action economy. First, Vecna gets to use one of his like special attacks. So Flight of the Damned, Rotten Fate, or spellcasting. He can also make 2 attacks with Afterthought on top of that. And I think that's key. I remember really being frustrated as a DM running stat blocks rules as written, where I would have to choose between multi-attack and spellcasting. And all of a sudden, my combats balanced themselves out when I allowed my creatures to like do 2 attacks, then cast a spell. Mostly so that their action economy could match the players. One thing Ian and I often say is that D&D combat really isn't the exchange of values, it's the exchange of action economy. Which is why you can have this big bulk bruiser monster that's able to deal a lot of damage, get whipped by a party of 4 with almost no challenge. And sometimes you have a party of like 4 level 2 characters and then like 4 goblins. And then all of a sudden those goblins like get some lucky rolls and have the upper hand. It's all about action economy. And seeing something like this, really to me, this is like a deadlier encounter than a lot of other really strong creatures kind of in the same tier before this design. So Afterthought gets a +13 to hit. It's 1d4 +5 damage, 2d8 necrotic damage. If the target is a creature, it's afflicted by entropic magic, taking 2d8 damage at the start of each of its turns. Immediately after taking this damage on its turn, the target can make a DC 20 con save, ending the effect on itself as a success, and until it succeeds on the save, the afflicted target can't regain hit points. That's nasty. So really, you're guaranteeing, 1d4 plus 5, plus 2d8, plus 2d8 damage per attack, meaning you can hit multiple creatures with this, and you're making it difficult for them to regain HP. That alone is pretty nasty before we even add the special attacks on top of it. So next, we get Flight of the Damned, which is on a recharge 5 or 6. Vecna conjures a torrent of flying spectral entities that fill a 120-foot cone and pass through all creatures in that area before dissipating. They all have to make a DC 22 con save. On a failed save, they take 8d8 necrotic damage, so it's like a beefed up cone of cold, and they're frightened of Vecna for a minute. On a successful save, the creature takes half as much damage and isn't frightened, and a frightened creature can repeat the save on each of its turns, and I'm going to figure on success. I actually think that's really interesting, because frightened is usually a condition that's tied to like wisdom saves. To have it tied to a con save is kind of a neat thing. And of course, this is an AoE on a recharge. Usually, I would say like only expect to use this once per fight, but looking at some of the other features, this one actually might get some regular use. All right, now on to Rotten Fate. Again, Vecna can cause necrotic magic to engulf one creature he can see within 120 feet. Again, DC 22 con save, 8d8 plus 60 necrotic damage. That's almost like worse, man. And it's basically a finger of death, but not a spell, so you can't counter it. So the humanoid killed by this magic rises as a zombie. Oh, and you can just do this over and over again. All right, before I get on to spellcasting, one thing that I've seen as like criticism for this stat block, Vecna doesn't get level 9 spells. Add level 9 spells if it means so much to you. But I'm sorry, like, getting, like, repeatable, like, level 7 effects, because really, I see Flight of the Damned as, like, equal to a level 6, level 7 spells for players. Rotten Fate is basically Finger of Death on command. I'm sorry, I think trading in a 1 level 9 spell slot for infinite level 7 spells, I think that it balances itself out. Yeah, and for spellcasting, he has unlimited at-will animate deads, dispel magics, flying, there's the flying. And he can dimension door twice if he feels like it. And then once per day, he can try to dominate monster, globe of invulnerability, plane shift. So he's got some escape mechanisms in here. Now the real nasty one is he also gets bonus actions, man. And this isn't a recharge bonus action. He can spam this. He can teleport up to 30 feet to an unoccupied space he can see, cause each damage of his choice within 15 feet of his destination space to take 3d6 psychic damage. If at least one creature takes this damage, he regains 80 hit points. Whew. I will say, you want to counter Vecna? Chill Touch. He isn't undead, you'll have advantage on your attack roll. He won't take a lot of damage, but he won't be regaining that hit points. So if you want to take out a god, just remember, take Chill Touch. Here's one that I thought was just bonanza. He can take up to 3 reactions per round, but only 1 per turn. Now, that being said, he doesn't get any legendary actions. I thought that was a really interesting choice. He doesn't have any layer actions, as far as I know, right? He doesn't have any layer actions. So I thought this, like, kind of consolidation into an agreed upon action economy, I thought that was kind of interesting. The other thing about reactions is that they can be shut off a little easier, too. Want to kill a god? Take Shocking Grasp. And what's interesting is he gets 3 reactions per round, but only 1 per turn. So first, he gets like unlimited counter spells that are 4th level or lower, and on a success, whatever the spell's level, the caster takes 3d6 psychic damage if the spell fails. So I guess he can be counter spelling your Chill Touch and Shocking Grasps. And then he also gets the Fell Rebuke. In response to being hit by an attack, he can deal 3d6 necrotic damage to the attacker. And Vecna teleports. So yeah, he's going to be really difficult to lock down. You combine the legendary resistances with this Dread counterspell. Now, one thing Vecna does not have, thank goodness, is magic resistance. So a lot of really powerful creatures have magic resistance, And no, he just has legendary resistances. So for a god, he is awfully mortal-ish, or at least kind of killable, except that he can decide not to be killable. But in terms of a boss fight, I have seen a lot of takes kind of thrown around about this. This is kind of how I would design a boss encounter now. The legendary resistance thing I think is kind of interesting. What I think is interesting about this is that he's really strong against like enemy casters. So I do know I don't know if you'd call it a critique or an observation. I just know spellcasters, especially in high level D&D, tend to be more powerful than martial characters. And I think this is a case where if you've got some strong martial characters, like especially ranged martial characters, this could be pretty good. And especially if he's doing things like trying to cast Dimension Door or Plane Shift to get away. If you have your own counterspellers ready, this is kind of an interesting boss fight. It's gonna be wild to try to fight him because there's just a lot of damage. But also, like, especially compared to something like the Tiamat stat block from Tyranny of Dragons, which had limited magic immunity. I don't know, I really dig this as kind of like a big bad final boss encounter. And like I said, it says he only has 272 hit points, but he could theoretically be getting 80 hit points back a turn with Vile Teleport, unless you have some way to shut that off. So now I want to hear what you guys think. Is this the kind of boss encounter design that you would be excited to see for D&D moving forward? Some of the criticism I've seen is that this stat block looks kind of bland. If so, how might you adjust it? Let us know in the comments down below. If you like this video, remember to let YouTube know. Like, subscribe, ring the notification bell, and have an awesome day, everybody. Bye-bye now.